Hey, what's going on, world? Thanks for tuning in. This is Copper Color Ty. Today's video, we're going to be discussing a little bit about this island near India, all right? And the people that live on the island, the indigenous people, are supposedly some of the last uncontacted people in the world. So the society that we have always been used to, these uncontacted people, prehistoric people, have never experienced anything like it. So we're going to discuss a little bit about these people, and we're going to be making some similarities and some comparisons. So let's get it.
What life is really like on the island cut off from everyone for 30,000 years, where locals repel all visitors with poison arrows. Over the years, the message from the natives of this tiny island of North Sentinel in the Bay of Bengal could not have been clearer. Go away. Go home. Buzz off. Visitors not welcome. We want to be alone. We know tantalizingly little about their language, their culture, their belief system, or even how many of them there are. But what we do know is that they have lived happily and largely healthily on their tiny, lush, mangrove-swamped 20-square-mile island for at least 30,000 years. The Sentinelese are the only surviving direct descendants of the first humans in Asia.
So it is said that the Sentinelese people are the only surviving direct descendants of the first humans in Asia. So what does this mean? The original inhabitants of Asia are not the modern day Asians we see on TV. No, and they are not Native Americans. They are copper colored, brown, melanated people. Asia is a huge continent filled with many different countries. At one point in time, they were all melanated, copper colored, brown people, now incorrectly identified as black people. Look at the footage. You clearly see what race of people they favor, the melanated people, not the Native American or anything we see on TV. These are what the first humans in Asia look like, melanated. The Sentinelese are the only surviving direct descendants of the first humans in Asia. So the first humans to ever populate Asia were copper-colored melanated people, aka black folk. In all the different footage, you clearly can tell they are copper-colored people with woolly hair. Black Asians from various dynasties, Xiao, Shang, and many others migrated from Asia thousands of years ago to the regions now known as North, South, and Central America. These Black Asians mixed in with Black natives who were already occupying these lands. This explains why some natives or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, aka Indians, have high cheekbones and slanted eyes. This type of image of the native of the Western Hemisphere has been widely promoted. Other natives who do not possess these features were carved out of history. To promote how other natives looked would not have been a balancing move for the colonizers. The oldest human skeletal remains in China are those of indigenous melanated copper-colored people. Indigenous African skeletal remains found south of the Yangtze River in China date back 8,000 years. Many scholars and laymen alike have recognized similarities between ancient China and Africa. Both the Chinese and West Africans had a mound culture that possessed similar burial customs and common symbols. Also, if melanated Chinese aborigines migrated from Asia to America thousands of years ago, then of course the first two dynasties of China were founded by indigenous melanated people. These indigenous melanated people may have been from Africa, may have been from America. What matters is the first two dynasties of China were indigenous copper-colored melanated people or melanated aborigines. First civilizations were called Jia and Shang. They were ruled by emperors called Jian, indigenous melanated emperors. But due to reclassification, these indigenous melanated aborigines are known as so-called black emperors. These indigenous blacks introduced farming and writing to China. Trade, cities, and travel grew under their leadership. In addition to writing, the indigenous blacks of Jian and Chang introduced bronze working to China. They also invented the pounded earth architecture with early Chinese city-states. Indigenous blacks founded many civilizations, not only empires in China, but empires of the world. There was an extensive mound culture in China stretching from its plateau in the west to the western coast of the Pacific Ocean. As you can see, the mounds were constructed by the ancient mound builders. We know who the mound builders are. This is where it gets interesting. Just like the ancient mounds found in America, some of the mounds in China were also served as burial places, religious or spiritual centers, and habitation. Not only that, the Chinese mound culture began around 3000 BC, 1,000 years after a similar culture had developed in Africa. So, if the Chinese mound culture began around 3000 BC and 1,000 years before Africa already developed a mound culture, that means America or Turtle Island is the first, if not the first, definitely one of the first mound cultures to exist. The Watson Break Mounds located in Louisiana and the Shell Ring complexes located along the shorelines of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida both predate the erection of the pyramids in Egypt. So there's a big possibility that the mound builders of America taught the Africans and the Chinese how to build these ancient mounds. Let's take another look at the map of Asia. Asia is pretty big, and they say the Sentinelese are the only direct descendants of the first humans in Asia. That means the first Russians were melanated, the first Chinese were melanated, the first Japanese were melanated, the first people in India were melanated, the first people in Saudi Arabia, yes, they were melanated, the first people in the Philippines, they were melanated, the first people in Thailand, they were melanated, the first people in Turkey, they were melanated, the first people in Syria, melanated, the first people in Iran, melanated, the first people in Pakistan, melanated, the first people in Afghanistan, melanated, and the first people in Vietnam, melanated. They were all melanated people. If the first humans in Asia were really melanated with woolly hair, why and how do the modern day people of Asia look like this all of a sudden? Sounds like social engineering to me. So if the first humans in Asia were melanated people, if they really look like so-called black folk, why do the first humans in America look like this? The government, public education, and the mainstream media have always told us the Native Americans were the first people to arrive in America on Turtle Island. I can recall in all my history classes being taught that the Native Americans crossed the Bering Straits, arriving to America. Let's do a little digging.
One leading hypothesis is that the ancestors of today's Native Americans walked across Beringia to reach the New World.
Now, this is Beringia, okay? Now, I believe through books and through class, it's often taught as they just kind of came over the bridge here, and they just slowly populated, Alaska and Canada, all the way down to modern-day United States.
This theory was developed in the 1700s and basically remained unchanged. 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, this migration supposedly took place after the last ice age melted the ice on the Bering Strait, exposing land for humans such as the Native Americans to cross. Public education teaches that these people migrated out of Europe into Asia, over the Bering Strait, and down and across into America. The problem with the Bering Strait theory is that there is much archaeological evidence that humans existed in America before the Ice Age. The Clovis people, who are considered to be amongst the first in America, entered across the Bering Strait from Asia. Current archaeological and biological evidence does not support this claim of the Clovis migration theory about Paleo and India migration routes. Scientists studied skulls, genetic patterns, and dental variations to verify the first entry of Mongolians into the Americas that only began after 3000 BC. The Clovis points found 9,400 years ago in the U.S. do not match the points found in Asia, the land where they were said to originate. It would appear that the Clovis technology was not an Asian import. It was invented here in the U.S. It appears that there is archaeological evidence suggesting that there were other people here. There are indications that there were early migrations into America predating the thawing of the ice glaciers, which covered all of Canada and half of the United States. Sites in Chile, Brazil, Mexico, Oklahoma, and South Carolina suggest that humans were in the Western Hemisphere as early as 30,000 years ago to perhaps 60,000 years ago. Clues from the skeleton skulls hint that the people may not be of Northern Asian descent. I don't know. So if there really is archaeological evidence that the Native Americans did not reach America by crossing the Bering Strait, how did they get to America? Let's keep on digging. Pale-skinned natives came about as a result of the original dark-skinned natives breeding with pale-skinned Europeans. A light-skinned native born from this union would again breed with a pale-skinned European. Thus, the progeny of this union would become more pale or genetically recessive. After centuries of this breeding process, eventually produced the pale-skinned native of the Western Hemisphere. The dark, melanated skinned natives who did not mix their seed still endure. The U.S. government has reclassified most as Black Americans or African Americans. The foreign U.S. government selected a certain psychological type of native, aka Indian, to promote to the world as this is a real Indian, as well as this is how a real Indian looks. The new group of hybrid people as Native Americans to the United States developed from children born from European females who procreated with melanated males, regardless of classification as American or Negro, as though females of America descended are not Americans. The European woman placed her genetically mixed half-breed children into the artificial category for the Americans as descendants to indigenous men of America, called Native Americans, adopting indigenous names created by indigenous men supporting patriarchy. I'm not telling everyone to believe what I say. I'm telling everyone to think about and research what I say.
More than 75,000 years ago, they made their way from Africa to the Middle East.
One belief is that the Sentinelese people came from Africa. Looking at modern-day world maps, Africa doesn't seem too far away from its neighboring continents. Africa, Europe, and Asia are literally close neighboring continents. We melanated people have the real power and rulership, but most don't know, don't realize, and don't care. So who's to say before modern-day power, Africa, Europe, and Asia wasn't all considered the same landmass? I am 100% sure these names we call these different continents today were not the names we called them back then. Modern day power and all their borders around the world are the only thing separating and dividing all these different continents around the world. Mexico was a part of America. Modern day power and all their borders is the only thing separating Mexico from being a part of America today. Melanated people fought and died on both sides in the Mexican-American War of all major battles. So-called Black Mexicans today reside where the first humans ever existed in Mexico. Vincent Guerrero, the first Mexican Black Indian president of Mexico, and his melanated army won Mexico's independence. Not the modern-day Caucasian, Mexican, or Native American. The Mexican-American War was a melanated or so-called black-on-black war. We outnumbered everyone. The Caucasian race did not have enough manpower to bring millions of us melanated people from Africa to America on small boats with no engines. Our melanated people were very advanced. We had enough manpower to fight on both sides of the major battles in this huge war. Back then, melanated people being the dominant race is not going to allow a smaller, weaker, outnumbered foreign race such as the Caucasian race to enslave and kidnap our people, then transport us from America to Africa, or how the public education tells it, from Africa to America. The first king of Hawaii, King Kamehameha I, was a melanated king with a melanated army. So of course the first people in Hawaii had to have been melanated, which produced this melanated king. So because the government says melanated people can only come from Africa, does it make it true?